should we tell the people where we went? Should we tell them what neighborhoods we saw?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, great.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Okay, so the route, let's talk about it in terms of the way that it is on the website. So if someone wants to follow along on the map, they can see in the order that we're talking. We did go backwards a couple days, but we can just stick to talking about it in the direction it was.
It's also not entirely clear on the map which is forwards and which is backwards because it's a loop.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, so the way that was forwards in our mind was that we left our house. We went out through Bushwick, out to Greenpoint, and we got there on either Central or Wilson, one of the streets that runs all the way. We went through the area where there's a lot of industry on our way into Greenpoint. We walked all the way around the water. That brought us through downtown Brooklyn and the Navy Yards. We got to Red Hook, went out to the pier, crossed over to Gowanus Canal, and walked under the BQE to get to Sunset Park, where Industry City was sort of our turnaround spot. Some days we went a little further. I think one day we went to 52nd Street, which was the route, but some days we cut it a little shorter because we were going over a marathon length. And then we went up to 5th or 6th Avenue and walked through Park Slope, got to Fort Greene, went through Bed-Stuy, hit Crown Heights a little bit, and took one of the main roads home, usually on Decatur. We could take Decatur for a long time.
That's right.
Yeah, so that was the path, and maybe we should share some highlights of that path.
Yeah. What are some highlights you have?
Well, one thing that we saw on the first day that I thought was really cool, and then we kept checking in on it on the other days, was down in the Columbia Street waterfront area where there were these tree carvings on the sidewalk. So we were down there the first day kind of early in the morning, maybe it was 10 a.m. or something, do you think? And we saw these etchings, I guess you could call them, on the sidewalk. And it was, you could see there was a tree, like a street tree, and the shadow of the tree had been etched into the sidewalk. But they were from the winter, and I think the first one we saw was from 2009 around 3:30 p.m. So we got excited that one day on the backwards route, we would be able to see what it looked like maybe around that same time. And we did actually end up back there around 3:30, but maybe you thought of this ahead of time. I didn't even consider it. It's summer and the tree's in full bloom and has leaves. So the shadow looked nothing like what the etching was. It was in the same direction, but it's like a huge shadow with just little light droplets through it, as opposed to the sticks, the empty tree that it would be in the winter. Do you remember who the artist was that made those?
I'm going to look it up now while we're talking. But yes, there were a number of trees on the street, including one that had a memoriam. The tree had been cut down. I don't know if it was during the course of the project or not. It would appear to be during the course of the project. However, the etchings looked like it was all done in one session. But perhaps it was not. And I don't think, I guess it couldn't be unless they deliberately took down the tree 3 months later. It had to have been done at a separate time. So this one particular tree was missing. It was an etching in the ground, and it said in memoriam from 3/11/2011 to 6/11/2011, I believe were the dates. And you looked, and there was a tree pit with a stump where the tree had been previously. All the other ones that we'd seen, the tree still existed.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So the tree in memoriam was from 3/21/2011 to 6/21/2011. So a slight correction there. And as far as the artist, I have a lot of pictures from the week, so it's giving me a bit of a hard time. It's a Japanese artist. Nobuo Nagasawa, and the name of the project is Timecast. So if anybody wants to look that up, they can do so. Yeah. But that was one thing that we saw along.
Yeah, that was a really cool thing. And I feel like I've been down there since then, but I've never noticed something like that before.
Yeah.
So those sorts of little things that even in all these neighborhoods that we know really well, there were these new things that we had never noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what were some things that you saw that you had never seen before?
When we were in South Williamsburg, there were a bunch of complexes, it's like 2 or 3, that had these big courtyards that were gated off. And inside the courtyards, there were 30 plus bicycles and tricycles that were just left strewn about the courtyard. And we saw them in the mornings and we were fascinated by them. We actually took some pictures, and if you see our Friday Instagram post, you can take a look at what was going on there. And as best we could discern, particularly from passing them in the afternoon and seeing the courtyard active, it's a majority, if not exclusively, Hasidic apartment complex, and it affords the space for there to only be 1 or 2 adults watching all of the kids as they get the chance to play in an unstructured way. And we both thought that was pretty cool, that it was just this community that was self-contained within this one courtyard that was able to, feel like they could have their kids roam around without there being any concern for their safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was nice to see. At first, when we walked by and all the bicycles were all over the place, my first thought was like, oh my gosh, what a mess. There's no order here. But then, yeah, when we walked by and they were actually active, it felt more like, oh, this is like the living room for the kid. When you go to someone's house and they have young kids and the toys that might be all over the place, like the kids they like get distracted and they don't put things away exactly how they need to be. And it's kind of nice that there's some outdoor space at that apartment complex where the kids can kind of do their thing and do their kid thing and leave their bike wherever. And it's like, it seems, this is all supposition, but it seems like no one really minds because it seems like there's some kind of order to that. It looks like chaos to me, but it seems like there must be some kind of order and patience with it. And like, it's just the way it is. Let the kids be free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what else was interesting? We went to under all 3 of the bridges, the Manhattan, the Brooklyn, and the Williamsburg, not in that order. And we found a little secret passage under the Manhattan Tunnel that neither of us knew about.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Or Manhattan Bridge, not tunnel. That it was a situation where if you went too far on one street, rather than having to go back a block and a half to get under the bridge, there was this passageway that was shoulder width wide that you could go into in order to get across. And it was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. It felt like, I don't know, it either felt like we were getting away with something or it felt like we were going into Narnia, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also passed by McGolrick Park when we were in Greenpoint, and one of the days that we were there were some kids that were up on one of the statues that we covered in our 360 video back in May, and that was funny. I wondered if it had anything to do with the fact that statues are coming down right now, that people are less inclined to like interfere with people's interactions with statues.
Oh, maybe. That's an interesting thought.
But yeah, they
seemed young, the kids.
Yeah, they were somewhere between, they were like 12, I think.
Okay.
Somewhere between 10 and 12. And they were like talking about like Pokemon or something, like, like just like something just silly and just hanging out like they own the place.
Yeah.
And nobody was saying anything. And yeah, it was a very strange scene. I've certainly not seen anything like that there.
No, and you wouldn't expect it. Also, the playground was open.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Something that I expect we'll see more of in the future, but was surprising to see for the first time, was seeing the same people in different points of the city on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we did, we visited Bush Terminal Park at the suggestion of our friend Layla, who works for the Parks Department,
Mm-hmm.
which is a converted sewage plant, basically waste
Yeah, it was
facility.
like a sludge dump or something.
Yeah. Right by the upper bay of New York in Sunset Park. And it has beautiful views of the city. It's a little hidden away, which is cool too. You wouldn't know it was there unless you were explicitly told, because you have to go through an area where there's offices or just kind of an industrial avenue.
Yeah.
And so we took a 360 video there. That's up for people to check out. And while we were there, there was a disabled person being pushed around by, I don't know if it was his aide or his relative or something, but they were going out. It was the middle of the afternoon just to enjoy the space and kind of get out. And we just took minor note of it, nothing of consequence. But then 4 to 6 hours later, when we're in South Williamsburg, we saw the same person being pushed by a different person.
Yeah.
And just, again, looks like they were going out to get
Just
some
going-
air
yeah.
or something.
But it was in a completely different part of the neighborhood, or I mean, part of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
The first time we were down in Sunset Park, the second time it was over near Williamsburg. So it's a really pretty significant distance. It did look like when we were leaving the Bush Terminal area, I noticed in the parking lot, it did look like there was a van, like a, I don't know if it was like a social service kind of type van, you know.
Yeah.
A van that could hold wheelchairs,
Yeah.
basically. So I assume that it was maybe, the person was with his aide in the morning and then maybe with family member in the evening or something. But that was cool to see the same person all the way across town. And yeah, we wondered if he recognized us too, or if it was just one way. And then, you know, wondering if there's other people that we just didn't notice that happened with.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned that on separate days, you saw the same man on a scooter.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, one of the days when I had to go to work in the morning and I biked over to meet you, I was right behind this guy on a scooter, and he had a fireman's pin on his bag, but he was going kind of slow. So it was like these two things. I was just behind him for a while, you know, waiting to pass. And I'm noticing like, oh, he's a fireman. I wonder if he's going to work, or, you know, having these thoughts. And then I think it was the next day we were walking, and it was in the same area where I had passed him on my bike. He was in the scooter, but we were walking this time, but he was on his scooter in the bike lane. I saw the pin again, and same guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. And we also encountered not the same person, but the same sets of people several times. Do you remember the name offhand?
State of Mind, I think.
State of Mind, yes. And they were a group. They had a pretty good sales tactic. The idea was they had these bags that were not like Tiffany-esque bags, you know, that kind of structured, what is it? It's not plastic. What is it?
No, it's like a coated paper or something,
Yeah.
maybe like a waxed paper even.
Yeah.
Like tall, a nice gray. They looked like gift bags or something.
Like something you could get if you go to a fancy event. And so the strategy was they'd approach you and go, have you gotten your bag yet? And so the first time we encountered this type of person, we said no. And then he attempted to hand us the bag, which we declined for a couple of reasons. Primarily because we figure it's a pandemic right now, and if we don't want something, we don't want to touch
I'm not
it.
going to touch someone's bag and then hand it back to them.
But also because from being in New York City long enough, you don't generally take something that somebody's giving to you because it becomes a lot harder to give it back to them if they're trying to sell it to you. And in fact, that was the case.
Yeah.
They had these products that were sounded really great. All made in the city, and it was like a beanie and some soap, I think.
Yeah,
and,
something like that, and some other self-care product, and
yeah,
I don't remember.
yeah. And it was, retails for 50, but yours for 22.
Right.
And it was, we politely declined. In addition to that, we weren't going to carry this bag for 20 plus miles, while we're walking. So the first time we encountered a salesperson for this, we had a little discussion about what we were doing. And in fact, he was the first person that we told, period, about what we were doing. He seemed a little confused, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I think he was like, his motive is to get out there and sell those bags. And
Yeah.
he's probably like, you guys don't want to buy the bag. I gotta go. Like, that's kind of what it seemed like.
Yeah.
But he was very nice. And
Yeah, absolutely.
it's not like we talked to him for that long.
Yeah. And we didn't think much of it. And then the next day, in a different part of the city, somebody approached us with the same thing. That was a much shorter conversation because they said, "Did you get your bag yet?" And we said, "Oh, no, but we talked to somebody already. Thank you." And then they laughed and moved on. And then a third time, it happened in a different part of the city. The first time it was around the Navy Yard area. The second time it was in the Fort Greene area. And the third time it was in the Brooklyn Bridge Park area. And each time it was the same, setup. Did you get your bag yet?
Mm-hmm.
No. And yeah, I mean, it's a great way to try and get people to engage in.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, so this actually happened to me. The reason I wanted to talk to the first guy is because just a few days before we started walking, someone approached me when I was out on my own and said, "Did you get your bag yet?" And it was right down the street. I had just kind of been hovering on the edge of a protest. And then I was leaving to go to work, and I assumed it was part of the protest. I assumed it was waters and snacks or something like that, and I obviously wasn't going to take it because I wasn't at the protest anymore, and I was right near my studio, so I didn't need water or snacks or anything like that. But then when we saw the guy, there were no protests nearby. It was early in the morning. It was like, I was curious what it was, and I'm glad we figured it out.
It was a funny place for him to be. He was obviously on the way from somewhere to somewhere, but it was kind of like an ant missing its colony.
Yeah, I did feel like that. Yeah, I was over near the Navy Yards and just on one of those random streets that's all industry.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing we saw. We also stopped by Jesse's old restaurant.
Yeah.
Athena's in Park Slope.
Athena's Mediterranean Cuisine on 6th Ave and 14th Street.
Yep.
Go there if you're nearby. They're open, outdoor dining. It's good food. I worked there from when I was 18 till I was about 22. So I worked there for like 6 years. And no, that's 5 years. 4 years.
3 years. 2 years. 1 year. She never worked there.
My fast math is not working. I thought I worked there longer than 4 years. I don't know. I worked there from when I was 18 till I was in my early 20s at some point. And yeah, it was a great place to work. Spiro's the owner, and he is a really nice guy, and I'm happy to see that they're doing well, and it was nice to stop by and just get to say hi and see that things are opening back up for them. He was pretty excited, I think, to be back at work.
Yeah, it seemed that way. And we also mentioned Industry City earlier. Industry City ended up being a pretty vital hub for us, which we think we'll be using many more times in the course of this walk, because that part of Brooklyn, which is 3rd Avenue in the mid-30s, is really, as far as how we planned out a lot of the walks, kind of the main way to get from South Brooklyn to North Brooklyn. And I don't think I'd had an opportunity to be there except for one other time when Jesse had an art show there with our guest next week, Tahir Karmali. You can get the plug in now. And So, yeah, I hadn't had a chance to experience it, and it was still, I think, pretty new then.
Yeah.
And it's a nice place, and it's also nice during a pandemic because there's hardly anybody there.
Yeah. There's a lot of bathrooms and not many people inside, and there's a bunch of outdoor seating, sort of all spread out. There's like benches, there's chairs and tables, there's reclining wooden chairs, and yeah, lots of places. And it was a nice little spot to rest.
Yeah.
I think we rested there every day.
Yeah. In some fashion or another, we stopped there for a little bit,
Yeah.
just because it has access to the bathrooms and whatnot.
Well, the one place that was really nice at Industry City too, they have the Zahatis out there.
Mm-hmm.
I've always really liked Zahatis because I lived in Gowanus for a while, and my roommate Layla introduced me to that place, and we used to go for bulk foods and, you know, all the nuts and cheeses and all the yummy stuff that they have there. So we got some grape leaves, and Mike got some orzo salad, and yeah, we were able to have a nice little lunch from Zahadi's a couple days. We didn't always eat there because, you know, too much of a good thing is too much. Is that the phrase?
Too much of a good thing is wonderful is actually the phrase.
Oh, but that's a nice phrase.
I know.
I thought it was...
Well, there's a couple of phrases.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the one that's like, don't spoil, you know, like too much of a good thing is not wonderful?
I mean, I don't know the exact phrase, but I understand what you're saying. Could be there's such a thing as too much is a good thing. I don't know.
This is interesting. I think I've always thought too much of a good thing is too much. Like that idea is what I always understood. But then you think too much of a good thing is wonderful. That's a completely different way of looking at the world.
I don't know if that's Mae West or it's like a thing you would find on a throw pillow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, so well anyway, we did 2 days at Zahadi's, and that's all we gave ourselves there.
Yeah.
Yeah.